Hello and welcome. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Nicholas Oppert, and I'm a trainer here at the NBS. Alongside my colleague Martin Marks, for the last 6 weeks, we've been doing question and answer sessions on Chorus for you. And we've had some really positive feedback on those sessions. But quite a lot of you have requested if we could put those online so that you could watch them again. So what we decided would make more sense would be to create 2 wrap-up sessions covering the most popular questions that were asked. And Martin will give you a little bit more information on that now.
This is the first of the 2 on-demand webinars which Nick mentioned. This webinar includes questions and clips compiled from each of the webinar series which Nick and I ran separately. So, there are questions and answers from the first 5 sessions, which covered getting started, searching for content, editing with Uniclass 2015 content, editing with common arrangement of work sections content, and of course, masters and duplicating. We hope you enjoyed and got benefits from the live sessions, and we also hope you will too from this on-demand compilation.
What happens when all of our licenses are being used? Well, that's a great question. So what happens, the way the licensing works is your organization will have a number of license seats. And essentially what will happen is when somebody signs into Chorus, they use one of those seats. And then when they sign out again, that will release that seat. So when your users in your organization reach the limit of the number of seats that you have available, what delegates will see is they will see a message similar to what I'm displaying on screen at the moment. Now, this has the option here to view the active users. So just to show what that would look like, you can also access the active users from clicking on your name at the top of the screen on this purple banner, and then you've got the option for active users. So this will show who is currently signed in and using one of your license seats. Now, against the names, you'll see this menu button against your name. This has the option to end a session. Now, if you are one of your organization's administrators, they would be able to access this information, and they would be able to terminate, a session of somebody that isn't currently using it but has remained signed in. If you're not an active user, then if you're not an organizational administrator, then you will only see this menu button against your own name. So if you aren't able to get a seat, you will be able to bring this panel up. You'll be able to see who's using it, and hopefully you'll be able to communicate with your colleagues just to see if they still need that seat, whether they can log out. If you can't get in touch, then you can get through to your organizational administrator and see if they can terminate the session for anybody that perhaps has not using it for a period of time.
Now, one of the questions that we got asked via email last week was we actually got asked about an IT support person. How can they update the Chorus software? Well, Chorus itself is a web-based platform. So that means that you don't have to have any software onto your computer at all. The benefit there is you don't have to go to your IT team to request for them to put the software on. But it also means that any updates that happen on the platform, when we push them out, because it's in a web browser, you'll receive them within a couple of minutes. So again, you don't have to speak to your IT department to do a software update in a way that you might have had to do with Create or Building.
One of the queries that came through before the session. So the query we had was, when I include a customer logo when creating a project, they get cut off at the edges. And how can how can I change, or can I change the setting somewhere? So let's say we have a company logo like the NBS chorus that you see here, and we've perhaps grabbed that from from a website that we visited, or we've been sent a logo file by perhaps a client or a company that we're working for. So if I just go back and select, I've actually got a screen grab of that image before, as we can see here, the NBS chorus logo. So if I grab that and put that in there, you can see this is what this question was relating to. It's actually just cutting the edges of that that image or that logo off, as you can see there again. So the way you can deal with that, there isn't a setting as such, but what we need to do is we just need to open something like Paint, and then once we have Paint open, essentially, if I go back to my files here, essentially what we can do is we just use something like Paint, and we just add a little bit of white space above and below and make it roughly square. And if we then use that, image, what that will do is that should then display properly. So again, if I just go to select that, it has the white space, as you can see there, and you can see that is now displaying that that image correctly for the for that tile view that we have there.
Next question I've got here is, how can I give access to the spec to colleagues? So, big thing about Chorus is that you can collaborate. And you can collaborate with anybody in your office, anybody in the UK, or anybody around the world. And when you're writing your spec, you might want to have your colleagues involved in helping to write it. It might be a large spec, and you might be separating it out to specializations. So the way we invite somebody into a specification is, well, first of all, we invite them into the project that the specification sits in. So we've got here the contents page for this project. If I wanted to invite somebody else into this project, I would just click on here where it says team members, and it gives me the option to invite a user in. So at this point, I can click invite user, and it asks me to enter the email addresses of the people I would like to invite in. Now, you can invite up to 1,000 people in one go. I would not advise doing that. But to invite somebody in, if you just click into the box underneath who do you want to invite, and the first thing it will do is it will give you a list of everybody in your organization. So if it was somebody in your organization you want to invite in, now here's Martin, so I'm going to invite Martin. You would just click on them and it would put their email address in. Next, it asks what project role should they have. So this is where you start to set the permissions of the people, of what they're allowed and able to do. And by default, it will give people contributor access. Okay? So contributor access enables people to edit, assign, upload specifications and sections inside the project. If I select the little down arrow to the right, you can see I've got 3 other permission levels here. I've got at the top, administrator. So an administrator has full control of all elements in the project, including documents, users, and their permissions. So you might not want to give that to everybody. We've also got a reader, and reader gives that permission to view specifications, sections inside a project without the ability to edit the information. So you might want somebody just to check the spec for you, but you don't want them to make any changes. And then finally, we have limited. And that means they have have no access to specs inside the project, but can access the top level project dashboard. And some of you might be wondering, why would you want to do that? Well, let's imagine I had a project here with 6 specs in. I mean, this one only has 1, but I had 6 specifications in here. And actually, one of those specifications was under NDA. Okay. I might want to limit the access of people coming in to specific specs. In this case, I could set Martin's access to reader for the whole project. But then what I can do is I can down to my specification level, and I can give a permission level at that specification. So if I had 2 specs here, I could have one as reader, I could have one as contributor. Now, by setting the permission at the project role, that means that that permission is fixed whenever whenever a new specification gets created. So if you create a new specification, the permission Martin would get for that new spec automatically would be reader. So it just helps you control that. In answer to some of the question that's just come in, can we invite external users? Yes, you can invite external users if you have chorus level 2 or 3. If you only have chorus level 1, then you can't invite an external user. To bring an external user in, all you need to do is just click into the invite bar, put their email address in, and if you want to put any more email addresses in, you can just put a comma in, and that will enable you to invite external people. If they've got an NBS ID already, you need to use the email address they have for that. If they don't have an NBS ID, when you send the invite, it will ask them to create an NBS ID. Once they've done that, they can come into the project, and these permission levels will be exactly the same. So if you wanted somebody externally to come in and read a spec, you could just set their permission level at reader. Okay. You can also add an optional message here. Just click to send an optional message along with it. In this case, I won't. And if you press send invite, that will send an email to the person. And it will also, the bell at the top of the screen here next to my name, a number will appear there, and it will give them a notification that they've been invited in.
So the first question that was sent through was in relation to the content. So it was be useful to have a list of the content that's within the Chorus platform. So I'll show you where you can find that. So I've just jumped back over to the NBS website, so the nbs.com. And firstly, in relation to the Uniclass content. So when we go to the platform option here, we have an option for Uniclass. That will bring us to the Uniclass 2015 page. And from here, there's a couple of useful tools. You can search and browse the tables. So we search for window, for example. That will bring up all of the results for Windows, and you can then filter what table we want to actually look at results from. So we might filter that by system or product, for example. You can also download the tables from this link here, and you can choose which of the tables you want to download, or you can download all of them. So I've actually downloaded these before, and what I can do here, if I just dock this at the top of the screen here. So this is what it would look like. I just downloaded this before and put some filters at the top here. So it has all of the, in this case, the systems in this sheet here. You can see the full code, the full title. We also have a column here to show what the equivalent NBS code is, which is the code that would be used in Create. And there are obviously similar tables you can download for products as well. in relation to the common arrangement of work sections, again, if I just go back to the home page, so again, from the platform option, we can click on NBS Chorus. And if we just scroll down a little, we can see we've got this option here, which is a hyperlink to the full scope of content. So you can download, obviously, the Uniclass 2015 prelims as PDF, or at least a list of the contracts, that is, that are supported by the function. But if we come down to the common arrangement of the work sections, you can get just an overview of the sections that this includes. And when we click on this link here, it will download a PDF which will give you indication to what all of the work sections are. Don't normally see the panel at the left-hand side here. So what that relates to, with the platform, we use what we refer to as responsive design. And what that means is, if I just minimize or just drop this out of full screen mode, as the screen size reduces, or in this case, as I drag the side of my window in, you'll notice the panel at the left-hand side has now disappeared. And the reason for that is the platform may be used on a variety of different screen sizes, and as such, we need to kind of optimize what you can see on the screen. So when that isn't displayed, you can click on the contents button, and that will then display that panel. And then when you click on something, the panel will then dock again. Now, you can, certainly in Google Chrome, which is what I'm using at the moment, you can try and adjust the level of zoom. So if I just reduce my zoom down, you can see that is now permanently displayed. So whilst it isn't necessarily a way to pin it, you can adjust your monitor resolution or try adjusting the zoom on your browser, and hopefully that will give you the view that you're needing.
Now, another question's asked about, and this is about Uniclass 2015, is when I add a second system of the same type, why does it add a type A? I'll show you this. Let's go back into our Newcastle Secondary School. And to give you an example here, I'm just going to go add contents. And you can see I've got an internal window system added already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another internal window system. So I'll just search for a window again. Now this is something that you need to, as a little reminder for you. Whenever you change the filters, it will remember the last way they were set. So just remember to go back into your filters and just reset them. So in this case, I've reset them to relevance, and it's brought the list back the way I expected it. So I've just come down my list, and I've got another internal window system here, template clause. I'm going to add that. And what it does is it brings in a type A. Okay. Now the reason it's brought in as a type A is each clause, each system that you bring into your specification has to be uniquely identifiable. So if we've got two internal window systems and we didn't have that type A, but they just both had the Uniclass 2015 code, there'd be no way to identify them. So what happens is Chorus will automatically, the second type of the system that you bring in, put a suffix in. And you can see when I look at the system, it's got the type A there. Now we'll have a look more at editing of the types when we come to look at the editing of Uniclass 2015, and I'll show you how you can actually change that type. Say, instead of being type A, it might be that you use T-sheet codes, for example, and how you could use those T-sheet codes. Now, one of the questions I got asked was, what is a template clause? Okay. The thing with Uniclass 2015 is it's a very expansive classification in comparison to Uniclass 2. So there is some content within Uniclass 2015 that we haven't written guidance or clause information for yet. But to enable you to use them, we've brought them in as template clauses, and they have standard rows within those. So first question is, how do you tell what is a template clause in the search results? Well, if I come down to this internal window system here, you'll see we've got a piece of paper with a line through it, and that indicates that this is a template clause. And I can just select a plus and add it, and we very quickly have a look at this template clause. You'll see with all your template clauses, it will have these standard 9 rows of description, system performance, system manufacturer, system reference, standards, certification, products, execution, system completion. There is no suggestions for these. You can just free type in what you want, and you can edit this system. Okay. Again, the reason we put the template clauses in there is to enable you to be able to write content where we haven't put information in. What we'll also be doing is we're able to see how many times template clauses have been used. So the template clauses that get used the most will be the first ones that we start to write content for.
The first topic area that I'd like to cover relates to a question really from the last session. So in the last session, we had a question about when the type A or type B markers get shown against a clause, and we were going to come back in this session and show how they can be changed. So what I'll do, firstly, I'll just go into this small project that I've created here. So we just click on the tile here, and that will take me into that project. And then to get me into my specification that I'm going to be using today, which is the architectural specification at the bottom, I just simply click on that specification name. So in order to address this question, you can see as I've added some clauses here, it's automatically added the type A marker or suffix. So in order to go in and change that, there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can click on the clause name from this list here. We could also click on add content to bring up the search and editor screen, and then we can select it from the panel at the left hand side. I'm just going to click on it directly from here, and we're going to look at how we can change this suffix here. So first of all, if I just click into the clause to bring it into my edit, and firstly we can see as we're editing a clause, you'll see your initials or your image displayed in the top left hand corner, and you'll see a grey box around the clause that you're currently editing. When you are editing a clause, it will be locked, so nobody else can try and edit that particular clause at the time that you have that in edit lock. So in relation to the suffix, when we're editing a clause, we can see this small pencil icon displayed against the clause heading. If we click on that, that will bring up the dialog box that you see on screen here. And firstly, from here, we can add a prefix if we want here. So if we did want to add a prefix of, say, a system number, for example, 047, or any other text that you want to add up to 255 characters, you can firstly add that in there. In relation, however, to the type A, type B suffixes, you can, of course, come down here and change these to anything that you wish. So if I wanted to make this set 1 or system A, system B, we can change that. And if you add further instances of the clause, the system will try to follow suit. So it would try to make the next one set 2 in this instance. We could also put in a code. So if we wanted to call this ceiling 001 as a code or suffix, we could add that there. From here, it is also possible to edit the clause title. We do recommend that you don't do that. However, we would recommend that they're left as per the standard Uniclass title. If you have gone in and changed that, you can always click on reset and that will reset it. So once we have entered the details that we wish, we simply click on save, and you can see there it has changed the suffix from type A to, in this case, ceiling 001. That also appears in the list at the left-hand side, and indeed it would appear elsewhere throughout the specification. You can also see the prefix which I included there is also, due to the resolution of my screen here, it's not showing in full, but it does show when you hover over the clause title there. So that is how you can change the automatically generated suffix.
Someone's asking, can I change row titles? So the row titles are these rows here where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. These titles themselves, if I click in, it won't allow me to change the titles for NBS rows. Now there is a way around this. And the way around it is, to the left-hand side, you can see I've got a P for the park, and now I've got a plus mark. If I click on the plus mark, it gives me several options here, and one is to duplicate the row. So if I click and select duplicate row, you can see now I've got another ceiling units that's appeared underneath. I can tile units if I wanted to. I can then go and park the ceiling units and use my own title there in its place. Now, some of you might have noticed when I did that and brought in my own row, so this is a user-generated row, a line appeared underneath the row title. And that line will only appear where you bring in your own clause or you create your own row. And that denotes that that is user-generated content. It will not appear in the outputted spec. It only shows when you're actually in the system within the platform.
Question was, why, when I delete a clause, it sometimes asks if I want to keep the clause and other times it doesn't. So this relates to deleting clause links from within the clause or the system outline itself. So to show how that works, so this clause that I've just added here, this fiber reinforced calcium silicate boards, and so I added that, I saved my system outline, and if I go to delete this clause, when I now save my system outline, it is going to prompt me with a dialog box like this. So in this case, it's saying there's one clause that can be deleted. I can click on the drop down and it will show me which clause it's referring to. If there were multiple clauses, it might say 5, might say 10, however many are suggested being deleted. So from here, we have the option to delete the clause. Once it's deleted, obviously that removes it from your specification. We also have the option to keep the linked clause. So that would leave it in the contents list at the left, and it would then become what's referred to as an orphan clause. So if in any doubt, click on keep linked clauses. You can always remove them at a later date. So the reason this is being displayed in this particular instance is when you're deleting the last link to that particular clause within this whole specification. In other words, the clause isn't shared or linked elsewhere in this particular spec. So that's why this dialog box comes up here. So I am going to delete this clause here. So if the clause was shared, like the self-drilling screws, if you recall, we just linked that into this instance of the system and a different one. So if we were to delete it from this clause here, and we click on save, it is going to just remove that, and it's not going to prompt us this time. And that is because that clause is still referenced and still required by the other instance of my sealing system outline. So that's why that appears sometimes and not others.
One of the things that we have been asked is, I occasionally get clause links which are red, and I don't understand why I'm getting this. What a red clause link indicates is what we call a broken link. And the best way for me to show you a broken link is, for example, if I go back to my first floor unit modular suspended ceiling system, and let's come into ceiling supports. Let's say, for example, we're just going to put a ceiling perimeter trim in. Okay. Now you've noticed when I added that ceiling perimeter trim, you might have noticed on my contents menu on the left, I've got a ceiling perimeter trims there. I'm going to save what I've done. And let's say I decide I want to delete that ceiling perimeter trim, but I'm not going to delete it from the system. In this case, I'm going to come to my contents and click on the little trash can that appears when you hover on it. And when I click on that, gives me a warning that it's going to permanently remove it from the spec. If I go delete, it's now gone from my contents. I'm just going to click into something else within my contents, the internal floor tiling system, and then I'm going to go back to that unit modular suspended ceiling system, and you'll see that I've got a red clause link here, and it's got two little links that are showing as broken. So this indicates that this is a broken link. At this point, you can make a decision whether you want to completely remove that ceiling perimeter trim clause because you didn't need it anyway, or you could bring back in a ceiling perimeter trim clause. When you bring one back in, though, it's going to bring it in as a brand new clause. So the information that was in it originally won't be in the new clause.
Next question I have here is, how can I add a clause that's not shown in the list? So I think by list we're referring to the drop-down lists that you see here. So here's one, because this is a user row that I added before for primary support, so there isn't any suggestions for here. But you might have other drop-down lists, and they may not show necessarily the option that you want to use in a particular specification. So for those of you that are familiar with Create, that had a function which was referred to as an as clause. And in Chorus, we refer to this as the more content function. So you can see we have the more content button at the bottom of this dialog. So this allows you either to link a new clause from the content set or an existing clause that's already been added into your specification. And you can do that to pretty much any row within your system outline here. To show how that works, if we click on more content, and firstly at the top here we have two tabs. So if we want to bring in a new clause from the content set, we use that. If we want to bring in an existing clause, we use the in this specification option. So just to show you, this is the self-drilling screws that I had before. You can see in the preview, you can see this is the clause that I'd already linked into my two clauses. However, if I was wanting to bring in a brand new clause, I can search for it in a very similar way as when you're adding content. So if we wanted to add sheep wool insulation for this particular clause, we can search for that. We can preview the clause. And if that's a clause we want to add, we can just go ahead and add it. So you can see there, that's added a link, a reference clause, even though it wasn't included on the drop-down list there. Another question that we have here is, how do I get back to the general guidance when editing a clause? So to explain what we mean by that, when we initially click on a clause in the contents list at the left-hand side, we can see general guidance for that work section, as we can see here. Now, however, when we click into a clause itself, it then shows us the guidance, any guidance for that specific clause. So there's a couple of ways that we can, go back to the general guidance. First of all, the system remembers the sort of order in which you've looked at the guidance. So you could possibly use the back button at the top here, and that would, in this case, take us straight back, sort of one jump back to the general guidance. If you click through quite a few guidance screens, the other method that you can use would be just to click into a different work section in the contents list and click back into the work section that you want to view the general guidance, and that will redisplay the general guidance once more. And the last method that you can use would be to click on the Add Content button and search again for the section that you're using. And you can then click on the clause title, which again is another method that would allow you to view the guidance there.
Now, one of the first questions I've been asked about common arrangements works in Chorus is how do I exclude and include clauses within Chorus in the same way as I did within building, where I would go through the list of all my clauses in a work section and exclude everything I didn't want. Now, admittedly, we haven't got a tick, a cross, or a question mark in Chorus, but what we do have the ability to do is you can actually, once you open your work section, you can start to go down your list of clauses, and we have parking. So those of you who've looked at Uniclass 2015 will be familiar with park already. So if I want to exclude any clauses I don't want, you'll see next to this 215 concrete facing brickwork, there's a P. If I click that P, it parks the clause. And that will mean that that clause won't appear in the actual outputted specification. So the parking is almost the equivalent of excluding within building. When it comes to including, what we say is, if you complete the clause, that is your version of including. If you leave gaps, I don't complete the clause and fill in all the rows, it'll leave what we call blank spaces. And we have something called a spec check report, which we'll have a look at on the publishing section. But when you run it, we'll show you where you've got blank spaces within your specification. And you can click in that and it will take you directly to those so that you can either exclude them or should say park them or complete that clause. So that is almost the equivalent of I'm undecided of whether I want to include that clause or not.
Why do some rows have suggestions and others not? So if we just jump back to the start here. So click into this clause. We'll just bring this clause into edit mode here. So some clauses will have options to select from on a drop-down list here, and you may find that others do not. So for the ones where there's a pre-filled value or a sort of drop-down list, these are included because they're usually the most common options. Other rows where there aren't any suggestions would be if the clause or specifically the row within that clause has no specific commonality. In other words, its contents would be entirely specific on a project-by-project basis. You'll also not see any suggestions or drop-down lists on any user rows that you may have created or any rows in any clauses that you've inserted.
Is it possible to modify the row title? Well, you can't go in and just click on a row title and delete it. It won't let you do that. But what you can do is, let's say, take bricks here, for example. If I go to the plus again, and actually I can got an option here called row. And if I click that, it will duplicate the row. So it's duplicated the bricks row and it's put it down here at 3. But if you also notice when I've duplicated it, it's also duplicated all the indents with it as well. I can then park the NBS rows and then just go to the duplicate that I've got. And in the duplicate, I can then start to edit these titles. So I can put in blocks. I can then put in any of the information that I want to put into those fields alongside it. And if I wanted to remove manufacturer, I can hit the plus mark and I've now got a trash can that appears next to duplication. If I select that, it will now also allow me to delete the rows. Someone's asked me, when I duplicate clause, so they say type A, and what they want to know is how do I get the clause number to look like it does in building? So within building, when you duplicate, for example, if I was to duplicate 110 here, it would come out as 110A. I can duplicate this clay facing brickwork in Chorus, just next to my little picture here on the left hand side is a little plus mark. I can actually select this plus mark and I can just go copy. And if I scroll down the page there, I've got another 110 clay facing brickwork, but it's come up as a type A. So what it's done here is it's using the same format as it uses for Uniclass 2015. So if I want to make this clause so it looks familiar to contractors from the specifications that have been produced in building, all I've got to do here is I've got a little pencil mark at the end of the Common Arrangements of Work sections coding. If I click on that, it will enable me to come in. I can remove this suffix, this type A, and just select it and backspace. But you'll notice as soon as I remove that and backspace it, we've got this red text that's come up saying code and suffix combination is not unique. So within cores, you have to make sure that when you duplicate that you have unique codes. So one of the things that we could do here is I could just come into the code 110 and put A. If I then go save, you can now see that it's put the clause as 110A clay facing brickwork. So it will then produce that in the outputted specification and it will look the same format as what it does within building. So that's an easy way to change that.
Can you import a building specification? So we are looking at that. An import from building is currently in development. At this moment in time, however, we don't have a confirmed release date. So watch this space, and hopefully that will be coming at some point in the future.
One of the first questions that I got asked, actually, it's quite an important one, is are masters in Chorus the same as office masters in Create or office standards in building and landscape? Well, in principle, they are the same. At the end of the day, they are a template clause or template work section that you can reuse in other jobs. The idea being is that you generalize those clauses so that you can then use them in more jobs. Okay. The way masters work in Chorus, though, is different. And the big difference is, you look at my screen at the moment, at the very top we've got projects and next to it we've got masters. And if I click on masters, you then see that we've got a whole section where all the masters are stored. Now in Create, the masters were actually stored within the NBS content. Okay. And within building, it was building or landscape, it was a case that you would have an office standard spec that you could copy information from, and you had to open up each office standard spec where you wanted to copy work sections. The benefit with Chorus is all your masters sit together. And what we've got here is what this is called the masters folders. Okay, so masters folders contain specifications and prelims masters that you can reuse. Now, there's several ways that you can set up your master folders. We've got, for example, here I've got Been and Gone. This is a coffee house project. So you could create a masters folder for a client that you're going to do a lot of work for, and you'll have all their masters kept together. You could then split it into type of work, so things like education projects, heritage projects, residential projects. And you could even take that to a step down. If I go to education masters, you can now see within my education masters folder, I've then got specifications. So I've got a masters for universities, masters for secondary school, masters for primary school. You could also set up masters for either common arrangements of work sections or Uniclass 2015. So if you're using two classifications, you could have masters set up in two separate folders for those as well. So it's a lot more flexible in how you can use it. It's a lot easier to find the content than it was within Create and is within Building. The other benefit is all this content is stored up with Chorus in the server, in the cloud, so that anybody can access these masters no matter where they are and no matter what device they're using. We've been asked, is there a quicker way of setting up a master than just setting it up from scratch? And the answer is yes, there is a much quicker way. I go to projects here. What you could do is, if you've got a specification that you see as an exemplar specification that you've done for another project, you can actually copy that spec into your masters. I'll give you an example here. I've got my Q&A example sessions here. If I go into my normal project Q&A example session project, and I've got a spec here for Newcastle Secondary School, and I'll just quickly click that open so you can see all the contents that are in there. You see the contents at the top says there's 31 clauses. And I'll go back to Q&A example session, and I'm going to copy that whole spec because I'm quite happy with that. I think it's really, really good specification. I come to the right, there's 3 dots here. If I click on those, it gives me an option within the list to copy to. When I select that, it shows me projects and masters. So I could copy it into another project if I wanted to. In this case, I want to copy it in a master. Now, when I say copy it in a master, there's another question that I had in about why, when I go to copy a specification, is masters grayed out? Now, you'll find that masters will be grayed out when you come to copy a specification if you do not have a master folder set up. So within your masters, you need at least one master folder set up before, when it comes to copying, this masters button becomes available. So I'll just click on that masters, and it first of all asks me to confirm the title. It's put the word copy in there because it's making sure I don't duplicate the title. I can take copy out, and immediately it says master title must be unique. But watch what happens. As soon as I select a master folder for this to go into, so for example, I will select my education masters here for the folder, it now allows me to have that title. So a specification or master specification title, you can have them named the same as long as they sit in either different project folders or different master folders. If I just go copy now, copying the whole of that spec, what some of you might have noticed is it's actually taken me back to my Education Masters. And we know we're back in the Education Masters, not just for title here, but if you look at my breadcrumbs, it's actually saying that we're in the Masters. And if you also look within my specifications, there's the Newcastle Secondary School spec that I've copied in, and it was copied in less than a minute ago. If I open that up, you'll then see that we've got 31 clauses in there.
The next question I have here, is there a quick way to copy content? I'm copying clauses from different specs and have to select the project and spec to copy to every time. And that's time consuming. So I think what is happening here is we are, or the user is going in and selecting content using the checkboxes down the side here. And then I believe from the description, we're then going to the option to copy to. We're then selecting project. We're then searching for the project that we want to copy into. And then we're prompted to choose the specification that we want to copy that content into. And then we copy that by clicking paste now. And then I think then going back into a different project or different master, I'll just filter this list by systems, for example, and then perhaps selecting something else, and then repeating this function to go into selecting the project and selecting the specification, and then obviously that repeats. However, there is actually a quicker way that you can do this. So just let this copy across. So the way this would work, if I wanted to copy over, let's say I wanted to copy over my local extract ventilation into there, is you can press Control and C on the keyboard. As you can see, that then copies the clause or the clauses if I had multiple ones selected. And then when I go into my projects, so I go into specification. So what you can do here is you can then do Control V, which as you can see is now copied in that that clause that I selected and used Control C with earlier. So that is a quick way you can copy from masters to projects and vice versa, just using Control C and Control V. On a Mac, I think the key combination is Command C and Command V. Next question is there a way to keep shared clauses when copying systems? So yes, there is, and just to explain what we mean by that. So let me just close that second tab down. So if I go into the master which I created before, so in this one I added two systems. I added low temperature hot water heating system and cold water system. And in each of those, I just go into one of these here, I added copper pipelines in for the pipes and pipe clips in for the supports. And if we just go and view that, if we look at the top here for copper pipelines, we can see that this clause is shared by the cold water systems and the low temperature hot water heating system. So what happens if we copy this information? So if I just copy my low temperature hot water system here and just do Control C, that's my preferred method because it's a little quicker. And I then go into my project. Let's go into my webinar example. Go into an empty specification here and do Control V. So what that will do is it will bring the system clause over, the low temperature hot water heating system, and it will also bring across any linked clauses. So if I now go back to my master and let's say I now copy over the cold water systems. And again, this also shares these two clauses. So if I copy that, and again, I'll use Control C and Control V, and I'll go back to my project and into my specification. And I now paste this again using Control V. So this is now brought over the cold water supply system. But because we already had pipe clips and copper pipelines, it's created another instance of these. So it's created a type A and a type A for each of those, as you can see here. So what we can do, let me just firstly get rid of these clauses. So if we had, go back to my master once more here. So if we had copied over both of these systems at the same time, again, using Control C, we'll go into the project again, and we do Control V again to paste these. So it's brought over the low temperature hot water system and it's brought over the cold water system. And it has maintained the link to the shared clauses for pipe clips and copper pipelines. And if we just go into here and look at these, you can see they are both still linked when we've copied that information over. So, so that is how you do that. So if you are setting up masters or you're copying content over from other projects, and you know that there will be shared clauses amongst the various systems that you have there and you're wishing to copy over, you might be better to copy over everything that you think that you may need all in one go, and at a later date you can always delete out the systems that you don't need. And what that would do is that means that you can bring over the shared links and maintain them, and it's probably going to be easier to do that than try and re-establish shared links later on down the line.
Somebody's asked, how do I tell when I'm looking in the specification within the platform whether a clause is a master or whether it is one that's been brought in from NBS content? The way we tell that is that we're going to have a look at, for example, this anti-finger trap styles here. You'll notice that once it's in the edit window, we have a little rosette. So very similar rosette to those of you who are used to create. And if I hover my mouse over that, it will tell me exactly where that master has come from. So you can trace masters back to where they've come from.
Thanks for watching this on-demand compilation from the question and answer drop-in sessions. We hope you get some benefit from it. Thanks again.